Hello and welcome. Today my guest is Claire Kerslake. Welcome to you, Claire.
Thank you, Bev. It's such an honour to be here.
I know that you're an avid listener of my podcast, so it's wonderful to have you as a guest today.
Oh, absolutely. I just adore your work, Bev.
Thank you. And Claire is a peer of mine, so let's talk about what it is that you do, Claire.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a registered nurse and diabetes educator, and I've trained in EFT, also known as tapping.
Great. And sorry, carry on.
And I work mainly with emotional eating.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm sure we're going to find out why that is the case. So let's talk about your well-being journey. How have you navigated your own well-being?
Interesting. Yes, it's been a bit of a journey too. As I said, I'm a registered nurse and diabetes educator, and I was educating clients around health and as a health professional. And I couldn't work out how I could be teaching clients what to do and know exactly what to do, but not following it myself. So I'd be, educating clients about healthy diet, etc. And yet on the way home calling into the servo and inhaling family blocks of chocolate. And I just couldn't stop that behaviour. It was irresistible. And I couldn't work out how it could be happening. It was like the mystery of the world. I just couldn't work it out. And that began a journey around strategy and habits, how to change habits, because health professionals often will say, okay, this is what you need to do, now go and do it. And we expect people to do it with no knowledge or understanding of habit formation. So that was the start of my journey. And then what I found, I got very good at those sorts of strategies, but I found with myself and also with my clients, it just wasn't enough. There was something missing. And you could have the best intentions in the world and follow the best strategies, but it still wasn't enough. It was like there was a big piece of the puzzle missing. And for me, that was tapping or EFT, which is absolutely miraculous in dissolving things like cravings. And I didn't believe it for the longest time. I thought, how can something that I struggle with so much, and it was a huge struggle, and for me, I had a lot of guilt and shame around that. And I didn't understand my behaviour at all. How could something as simple as tapping and saying a few statements help that? And it wasn't until probably I was sceptical, I came across the research around it that I thought, there's something in this. The research is showing extraordinary effects. And then I became, really interested in training myself and have seen beautiful results, life-changing results in my life and the life of my clients. So it's my journey. So yeah.
So I think we always learn what we teach, so that's always wonderful to hear that a practitioner has a real experience, because then we have more compassion for our clients and understand where they are and what the situation they find themselves in. And Claire, if we look at, you talk there about you didn't understand it. So what are some of the common ways that we self-sabotage ourselves, even though, like you mentioned, we've got the best intention, we've made a decision to eat differently or to stop a certain behavior. So what are some of those common ways we self-sabotage?
Yes, there's lots of little ways. And when you think that we make over 200 food-related decisions a day, which is extraordinary, is it any wonder? And I think our environment is not set up really for us to follow a healthy diet. We've got all these cues around us to not do that. So sometimes it's around strategy. It can be, not having the healthy food available, etc. I see a common sabotage around, we think that willpower should be enough. We think, why don't I have enough willpower? And we blame ourselves often. So there's a lot of beating ourselves up. And one of the things I feel really strongly about is self-compassion. We need to be kinder to ourselves, not only because it's a nice thing to do, but beating ourselves up doesn't work. It makes us less likely to succeed. Where with self-compassion, that self-kindness, increases our motivation. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle for me, that self-compassion. Other ways we sabotage will be things such as being a bit mindless around our behaviours. So often it's so automatic. There's, the day's, not turned out how we would like it to turn out. Oh, I need my chocolate, or I need this, or I need that. Often we don't even think about that. And so it can be just to put a little bit of space in there and to think, okay, what is it I truly need? And that's one of the best questions we can ever ask ourselves. And just to check in, what do I need? When I do that and put a little space, I notice I'm thinking, oh, goodness, I need X, which might be my favourite comfort food. Hang on, what do you truly need? And often it might be a nap, or it might be just to sit down with a cup of tea, just those really simple comfort things that actually meet our needs in a real way. So that's just to be a bit more mindful around our actions would be a couple of the ways that we can,
Because there's a compulsion around comfort or emotional eating. There's no logic in it. So that sort of compulsion, I guess if you don't have the stuff in the cupboard, you're ahead of the game. But I know for myself in the past, I would have driven to go and get that stuff. You know? So what you're saying about, asking yourself what it is you really need is a great way to circumvent the problem. But I guess, that's still relying on some level of willpower at that moment in time, because you've got to be willing to press pause, haven't you?
That's right, because it can be so seductive and so strong. And most people experience cravings. Most women, studies show most women will have experienced a craving over the year. And for anyone who's ever had a craving, it's so, you feel like you're going to die if you don't have that item. It's so strong. So yes, is it any wonder? And the research also shows that we usually give in to cravings. Another thing that I want to mention too around this is that we often forget what's worked in the past. We get in the moment, we think, we forget that, for instance, my tool that I use and talk about tapping, we forget how effective that is. And, sometimes this rebellious streak will come in, like if I'm in, and it happened last week actually, the day hadn't gone well, and this little voice was saying, it can sound so reasonable, why don't you just call into the servo? And I'm driving past, and, that would be lovely, this voice sounding so reasonable. And I think, no, do what I teach. So I'm driving, I'm starting to tap, I'm tapping on the steering wheel. And fortunately drive past, and only a couple of minutes it's gone. And I know that works. I teach this stuff, but it's remembering to do that. And I think that's the same for all of us. And often I ask my clients, what's worked in the past? And they go, oh, that's right, this has worked. We just forget, which is,
And so what underlies that self-sabotage? Because you say you can't rely on willpower. So if we know and understand that, what is it that drives us so crazy like that?
It's interesting. I think habit is the big one. We have these, we're driven, and I know you're a habit specialist, Bev, but, we're driven by habits to make our life easier. And sometimes these negative habits, they're a bit hard to break. So we can easily slip into that. And life's so busy. We can get, even though I teach mindfulness, and I have to continue to remind myself, okay, stop, breathe, put some space in. We've got all these demands coming in. So that, I think, has a big effect on those drivers. And our bodies, I think, are designed to make us feel better. So, the quickest, easiest, that's the way they'll go.
And I agree with you that sort of, instead of the mindless moving with whatever that craving or because is that what you want most in that moment? You know, what is it that you really want most? Because if it's your big picture is to be fit and healthy, then actually doing the drive by the servo, I completely understand that example, because I used to drive between Sydney and where I live now up at Caves Beach.
Yeah.
And I actually got into the habit of stopping at the servo and buying something for the trip.
Yep.
And eventually I realized, hey, you're creating a new habit here that you don't want. You know? And it's almost calling your own behavior.
Yes, that's right. And if you spend, that was a big thing for me. Living in the country, often you do spend a lot of time on the road. And that was a big one for me. Yeah.
And I noticed you mentioned there about, your day hasn't gone to plan. And I think that is so common when I've been on calls, with other members in having a learning, and somebody's having a bad day. Other people will suggest wine. And I'm going, no, I don't think so. Maybe a walk, maybe something else, but not wine, because I know for me, if I drink alcohol, that's a slippery slope, because then I'll be on the seafood diet, eating everything that's in the cupboard, So it's amazing how our brains sometimes, like you say, that little voice, it sounds so loving and compelling, but it's actually not supporting us to move forward. So.
No, not at all.
So then, Claire, if we recognize it, so we recognize we either comfort or emotional eating in some way, and it's sabotaging us, how do we move on from that?
Yeah, well, the first step is recognition, as you say, and also I suggest everything be couched in self-compassion. It can be so easy to beat ourselves up, and it's natural when we're cementing new habits in, we will slip up. That just goes with the flow. That's life. So just to be compassionate about that, and that beautiful, okay, what's happened here? That lovely, gentle, okay, let's have a look at this. I think for me, as tapping is such a beautiful tool, and we can use it in the moment, and we can also use it at other times, and it's absolutely perfect for things. If you've got a particular food that is your comfort go-to, actually having that in front of you, and it can work very, very quickly. I've done a tapping session with someone around beer, and 10 minutes he thought, I don't think I really want that. And I've gone from inhaling, I could easily eat a family block of chocolate.
I'm with you. I'm putting my hand up for that.
To someone can offer chocolate. In the past, if someone offered chocolate, I'm thinking, oh, well, I just want the whole block. I don't want just a piece. But of course, in company, you're polite. You just have a piece. Well, now I'm one of those people that can just take a piece and be happy with that, which is, if you told me that was like that, I would have said you're crazy. Something I struggle with so much is just not going to happen. And the other thing I loved was the chips, the packets of chips. And I used to have a 200-gram packet of chips. I could have that in a family block of chocolate, easy. And now I can have two chips, which is just, you think, oh my God. I used to think, what planet are these people on that they can take 2 chips? And now I've become one of them. So, that's amazing. So tapping in the moment is, as a couple of minutes, you'll, that craving will have reduced to the point where you think, well, I actually don't want that anymore. So that absolutely, I'm going to die if I don't get that, just dissipates just so quickly. And then, a little bit longer, and you can get to the point where, you can still choose to have that if you want, which is lovely, but you don't need to have that. So that is true freedom. The other lovely thing about tapping, which I think is extraordinary and quite beautiful, we think something that we struggle with so much is going to take a massive effort to overcome. That's just the way we naturally think. But with tapping, it's not the case. It can dissolve very, very quickly. And the studies around this are amazing. In fact, they've had to lengthen some of the studies when compared to other modalities such as CBT, because tapping just works so much quicker, which I think is incredible. The other thing is what we call an apex effect. So that is just a way of saying that you forget you ever had a problem. And in the studies, you know, they'd ring the people up. Obviously, they would follow them up for a year, and they'd ring, let's say they rang Sue, and Sue, how are you going? You know, you were in the study with the tapping. Oh, yes. And so Sue, how are you going with the Kit Kats? And so Kit Kats, what Kit Kats? And I said, well, you know, you're having, 5 Kit Kats every day. I said, oh, that's right, I was too. And so you just forget there was ever a problem, which I think is just such a beautiful thing to have, something that really consumes your life. And for me, carried a lot of guilt and shame around to just be gone. And then you're free to live your life, which is incredible. So tapping in the moment is really important when we get those cravings, and it's the last thing you want to do. And so I say for myself, even though I don't want to tap, even though I'm really desperate for this Coke and I absolutely do not want to tap, so tap on that, and then you're happy to tap. Just that if, we talk about willpower. If there's willpower around anything, it's such, perhaps before I have that, I'm going to do some tapping. And then, yeah, you're right. And then tapping outside of the moment, because some of these cravings are rooted to, say, childhood memories. So let's say you went to your grandparents and, it's obviously a loving environment, and they always gave you chocolate or some sort of comfort food, that will be linked. So you might find, I see this in a lot of my clients, that every time you're emotional or need comfort, you go for that food. And so sometimes it's tapping on those, childhood memories, which can clear quite beautifully. But sometimes we need to do a little bit of work outside of the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we've been talking about tapping, and you mentioned some science. So let's talk about the science of tapping. So what is it? Why does it work? How do you get skilled in this? Let us share that with the listeners.
Oh, beautiful. And it's quite a strange modality. And I used to think, I'd introduce it to a client and say, oh dear, there's this thing, I think it works. And which for a health professional, the research is amazing and just growing. You could describe it as psychological acupuncture. So you tap with 2 fingers on different acupressure points on the face and upper body while you say what we call a statement around the issue. And so it seems to work on the stress centres in the brain, the amygdala, and just lowers that the stress around that. And in reality, what we see is these issues just dissolve. So whether it's a craving, like we've talked a lot about, it might be a limiting belief. For instance, you might have a belief around, I can't throw food out. And we know that some of the things now with research, not only is it what we've heard all through our life, but it's passed down epigenetically, so through our genes. So it can seems to dissolve those as well, which is quite beautiful. So it works on those, on the stress centre of the brain. What the research says too, we can see now there's tools such as functional MRIs, for instance, so we can see what's happening in people's brains. And, for instance, one study that was done, and this is only in recent times, they took participants and they showed them photos of common comfort foods, and their brains lit up. You could see the different colours in their brains lighting up. And then, of course, after they had their tapping program, there was no lighting up in their brains. And the MRI person said, what have you done to these people? Because the change was so extraordinary. So it's lovely that we can actually see. We've always known that it works, but it's lovely that we can actually see that it's working. So it's been around 30 years. And just, of course, with the research, which is extensive now in a number of countries, Australia's had a lot to do. I've trained with one of the leading researchers in Australia, which is wonderful. And it's good as a health professional. I love to see that body of research just growing and growing. Fantastic, because we need it. Like, this is a tool that makes a difference.
Yeah. And I guess for the skeptics, a lot of people do need evidence, so the studies actually support that. But I think you often say, Claire, is even if you don't believe it, just give it a go.
Absolutely. It's not a placebo. Some people think, oh, you got to believe it. You don't at all, which proves it's not a placebo. Just give it a go. Yeah.
Amazing. And so can you give, so you mentioned, tapping in the moment. So can you give an action to listeners that would support them? Because obviously in the moment, you said your craving is sometimes speaking louder than your own ability to transmute that.
Yes, that's right. And tapping's fairly easy to learn. It's great to, you go with a practitioner, you can go a lot deeper. And what I find is we've got great intentions, but we think, oh yes, I must do that tapping thing, but you never quite get around to it. But there's in fact lots of YouTube videos around on tapping that will teach you the sequence. There's a specific sequence that you do. I teach for practitioners to actually rate the intensity and just tap until that, for instance, in a craving, you think this is 10 out of 10, might even be higher than 10 out of 10. So to get that intensity right down as you tap. Now, sorry, Bev, I've forgotten part of the question.
Well, if it's in the moment and somebody, so let's say they do know how to tap, how can they in that moment take an action that would support them?
Mm-hmm. For me, that would be choosing to tap. They say, okay, and setting out, perhaps it might be a little rule. For instance, I have a little rule that, okay, before I'm going to go to that comfort food, I'm going to do some tapping. And, very simple, couple of minutes and you're right. And, that would be my suggestion. And also that lovely self-compassion to not beat yourself up for not, let's say you don't do that. So, no, I'm going to have that. I know I shouldn't, but I'm going to do it. Don't beat yourself up. Say, okay, what happened there? And then you can make a better choice next time.
Yeah, true that. Yeah, it's amazing that it takes the sting out of that. Like you say, there's no guilt, there's no shame around that. Because if, for example, you do eat a slab of chocolate, the question I always ask is, how did it help?
Yes. And how did you feel after?
Yeah. Usually, because if it didn't help, then it's a real sign to you that doing something differently next time will be a better choice for you. But it's like you say, is in the moment is. So I think in there you're saying is know how to tap. So, educate yourself on some basic techniques. If you've got a really big problem, then you do need a practitioner to support you, because we don't take ourselves deep enough, I think, with the tapping. When I first came to tapping, it was not for anything like that. I was experiencing debilitating headaches from a chronic infection that I had. And what I found is by doing the tapping, even though I didn't always necessarily say the statements right and those sorts of things, I would just say, even though I've got this terrible headache, I still, love and respect myself.
Yeah.
But the tapping on the acupressure points used to relieve the headache.
Yes.
So that's what got me into tapping. And that was in, 2012. So, it's a tool that I've used. Do I use it all the time? Probably not enough. But I just find that it is my go-to. So that's really great that we've got some practical way. Like you say, a few minutes, doesn't have to be hours, a few minutes, create a pause between the sort of stimulus and response. And that will give you the opportunity to choose a different path, or like you say, you might still eat some chocolate, but you won't eat the whole slab.
That's right. The other thing I want to say too is in the moment asking that question, what is it I really need? And that's such a beautiful question for all of us to ask. and check in. And your body's very wise. It'll tell you if you just check in and say, okay, and then, okay, I need to sleep, or perhaps I need to drive by the beach instead of the servo and just sit for a few minutes. And certainly I've done that when the days, the wheels have fallen off and the proverbials hit the fan. Just call in. I'm lucky it is near my work, and just sit and allow that surrounding to wash over your soul. It's beautiful. So that was far better than calling into the servo.
Yeah, and so for those who don't live near the ocean, it might be a park, or it might be, something in nature. I'd say something in nature is a really good mood shifter and gives you different perspectives. So they're great ideas there, Claire.
Yeah.
And so, Claire, what are your tips for living fabulously?
Well, I've probably alluded to them already, but that beautiful self-compassion. I think anything we do, we're so quick to beat ourselves up, and just to live your life with that lovely self-compassion is key. And, sometimes we can, just be too quick to beat ourselves up. So that's beautiful. Of course, tapping is fantastic because it's such a gorgeous tool, not only in the moment, but even regularly. Life can be so stressful for us, and we know that it does have those beautiful effects around our stress centres in our brain. In fact, will reduce our cortisol levels by around 24%. So, and I know much of the work you do, you talk a lot about chronic disease. You're an expert in that field. And that chronic stress is such a big thing. So to have a tool that we can use regularly to reduce those stress levels is just absolutely beautiful. Yeah, that would be two of the tips I would have.
Okay, great. Thank you. And you can find Claire Kerslake at her website, which is clairekerslake.com, and also on Facebook. And these will be in the show notes for you so that you can check Claire out and see what it is that she's doing. And Claire, thanks so much for being with me today, because when we share our wisdom like this, so for me, I'm just reminding myself that, yes, you haven't been using your tapping as regularly as you want to. And for people who don't know anything about tapping, here's your opportunity to go and explore it, because if you just take on board what Claire has said around the fact that it's got a science-based research behind it. It's not just a fluffy, whimsical thing. It's actually, there's a lot of science-based behind that. And not just with things like food cravings and so on. There is a lot of evidence around PTSD. So if you have somebody in your life who's got that, or even like I said, I used it for a physical pain, not an emotional pain, a physical pain. And it just shifted that, so I was doing that. I actually came across Jessica Ortner, and that's where I sort of first learned about tapping from her. And, using tapping at different times in your life, because it does lower the stress. It means that, for example, if you are a poor sleeper, one of the things you could do is to do some tapping rounds before bed to reduce the anxiety and stress that's maybe subconscious or maybe conscious. Reduce that so that you drift off into a really deep sleep. So some really great ideas. And I love the idea of self-compassion. Life is hard enough without beating yourself up. So take really good care of yourself. Be kinder to yourself than you think you need to be. Life is just too short, and to spend that time, if you do go off the rails, like, my clients do that too, it's okay. Well, what caused that? What was underlying the problem? Because when you understand it, and like we said, bring awareness to something, then you can take those next steps. It's when you are just mindless about everything and you're just on the automated path that your brain loves, because your brain loves to predict things. Your brain loves the simplicity of never having to think about that again. So it's conserving brain power, So the mindfulness is what actually interrupts that patterning. So beautiful ideas there, Claire. Thanks so much for being with me today.
It's been a pleasure, Bev. Thank you for having me.